Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a conversation with one of Milwaukee Rep's Impact Partners, YWCA. I'm Jenny Toutant, the Interim Chief Engagement and Education Officer. So Martha, can you please introduce yourself, your role, and tell us a bit about the mission of YWCA?
I'd be happy to, Jenny. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I am Martha Berry. I'm the Chief Racial Justice Officer of the YWCA Southeast Wisconsin. And our work is broad. Our mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We have a variety of ways that we carry out our mission with lots of different programs, from our high school equivalency program to work experience programs to a career opportunity center, which isn't open right now, and our racial justice work, which is a variety of training courses. This summer we're doing 2 different series. So lots of education, advocacy, working on voter engagement, voter registration, and a variety of other work with our Bridge to Work efforts around employment.
Wonderful. So I had the wonderful opportunity to partake in the YWCA's Unlearning Racism Tools for Action workshop series. Can you tell us a little bit more about that course and what that entails and how people might sign up and all of that?
Sure. So we designed the course, meaning Paul Pennebaker, our former president and CEO, designed the course a number of 12, 13 years ago. And it was an opportunity to get a lot of people engaged in having conversations around race and racism, and starting with what's the impact? You know, like what does racism actually look like in our community, and how does it impact people who have been targeted by racism? It gives us a chance to spend a little bit of time looking at history and therefore how institutions cooperated and the government structurally got racism so embedded in policies and practices. We look at how it manifests, particularly in Milwaukee, as it relates to housing, but you can think about jobs, you can think about transportation. Many healthcare systems are impacted by the way that access and opportunities have been denied. And then we get into looking at whiteness and how whiteness was constructed and therefore allows a group of people, namely white people, to be in charge of writing and determining the direction of things. And so that we can move into the last 2 sessions where people get a chance to think about what would it look like to take action. So what's my implicit bias? How does it show up? What are some of the ways in which I've been using microaggressions and improper language in referring to different groups of people or pretending to be colorblind, whatever it might be. And then moving into, like, what's my next step? If I'm in an organization, what can I do to look at policies? Or what if I'm, independent and thinking about my family, what can I do? So giving people the skills, the beginning skills to try to build in that direction.
Great. Yeah, it was a really powerful course. So again, for those of you who are listening, I highly recommend it. And your mission to eliminate racism and empower women is, incredibly relevant, obviously, to the events of today. How has the recent uprising in the civil rights movement impacted your work?
Well, I think the biggest impact is that more people are now willing to have conversations about race and racism. I think the challenge is that people of the global majority, so folks who have been targeted by racism, have been talking, protesting, working, thinking, courageously advocating to get us to look at issues around racial inequities for not just decades, but for centuries. And I think the challenge is that while their lives have been deeply impacted, we've been able to sort of turn away from it and not really think about it or address it. And I think George Floyd's death, in such a visible, visceral, horrific way, broke people, broke lots of folks of color, but also broke white people and broke our hearts, made us enraged, made us think, okay, people have been trying to tell me this, I have to listen. And so we have to purposely turn in the direction of looking at these racial inequities. And I think instead of blindly assuming it was somebody else's responsibility, we have to look at the magnitude of what racist policies, practices, and procedures have meant for people in institutions that they're working in and across institutions. And it's overdue. We should have had our eyes open before, but it's allowed us to say, okay, come join us. We've got these classes. You want to get more educated. We encourage people, if you can't sign up for our classes, start reading books, listen to authors of color, why don't we know James Baldwin? How come, Langston Hughes is the only author that we've heard of. What are the playwrights? Why do I not know August Wilson's work? And what do I need to do to really think that through? So many, many more, in terms of how it's changed our work, many more organizations are looking to us to say, okay, we've got to have these conversations, but help us figure out how we can do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it really feels, I've heard this phrase a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, that we're really dealing with two pandemics right now. One is, systemic racism that's over 400 years old, and then obviously the more recent one being COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has your programming had to shift in light of COVID-19 as well? I mean, it feels like there's such a urgency to do this work right now in light of the uprising, but it's also, we're still in the middle of a, pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had been offering our classes always in person, with 25 to 50 people in a room. And obviously when, everything was shut down, we moved to an online platform. So we're using Zoom as our tool. And it has given us the opportunity to kind of recraft what we do, because there's so many activities that you do in person where it's easy to talk to your table mates or have a listening pair or get up and move around the room to do some kind of an activity, and that's not going to work when you're on an online platform. So we've had to adapt. We also found that people just couldn't stay online for 4 hours, even taking breaks, and so we've cut the course down slightly so that it's 3 hours instead of 4. And as a result, we've built in time for people to do breakouts in small groups so that they can actually get to know each other in the ways that you would get to know each other if you were in a classroom setting. So it's given us access to people that previous to this were not either interested or able to clear their calendars to attend, spend an entire afternoon with us. So we've gotten more leaders of organizations to sign up, and some of that's been people just going after them and saying, you have no excuses anymore, you have to do this, come join us. Such to the point that our class, our Zoom account would allow us to have up to 100 people, and I was like, that's way more than we can probably manage in terms of breaking up and coming back. So we capped it at 60 and ended up with 15 or 20 people on a wait list. So right now, both classes, we have an Unlearning Racism 6-part series that's going, and then we did Conversations on Race, a modified short version where it's 5 sessions of 2 hours each. And both of them are at capacity with an overfilled capacity. So we're looking at, the reality is we may not be in person in fall, and so we may just continuously offer these kinds of things on a regular ongoing basis, and give more people an opportunity to engage in these conversations and start moving their organizations and businesses forward.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot in my work too about how are we having to redefine what access means?
Yes.
And in some ways there's an opportunity to reach more folks because we're now forced into this virtual platform. So I'm glad that there are people that are taking advantage of it that might not have otherwise been able to in the past.
Right, exactly.
So thank you so much for sharing your work with everyone too. I know that we wanted to keep this conversation a bit short. I'd highly, again, encourage those who are listening to check out YWCA's website, sign up for the course if you can get in or on the wait list. Are there other ways that people might be able to learn more about YWCA's work or get involved in any way in the mission of the organization?
Our website has a lot of resources. So if you go to our website, ywcasew.org, and go in to our racial justice work, we have a whole lot of resources, and that we're trying to clean it up, but moving from one platform to another, there's a lot of racial justice resources broken down around historical references, looking at whiteness, looking at, the impact of racism. And so there's books, there's articles, there's some video clips. So there'd be a way to sort of almost do your 101 version of getting engaged. But I always encourage people to start reading more broadly, looking more broadly. It's hard in this particular time to engage with communities that look very different than you, but how do you support? What would that look like? And so getting people to think about Milwaukee as a community that we want to thrive, and too much of the resource has been put in certain neighborhoods and into certain organizations and businesses. So, even now with the PPP, just the Paycheck Protection Plan program. Who got that money? And, you know, what smaller organizations really could have benefited from it, but didn't have banking relationships?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sort of, this particular time invites people to ask the hard questions, be uncomfortable, you know, begin to realize there's a lot I have to unlearn. And I was socialized to live a certain way and to think everybody's worldview was the same as mine. And then to realize it's not. And I have to, you know, get outside of my bubble and think very differently and challenge myself and listen to people who's I disagree with completely, and then think, well, why am I so disagreeable? You know, why am I disagreeing with them? What is it about their argument that really challenges my thinking? And how can I better understand what they're trying to say? What do I need to go read and learn a little bit more? But then it's really, how do I take action? And, you know, so if there's a place that I have some passion, what am I going to do? What would that action look like? And sometimes it's really simple as challenging the notions that come up in, you know, casual conversations. Sometimes it's family, you know, who are saying things and you have to say, I disagree. I think that's, you know, way off. So getting people much more comfortable. It's sort of like as you're growing up and you realize, you know, when I was a teen, I was precocious. And I remember my mom saying, we are not talking about sex in this household. And, you know, so I remember being in the car saying, well, we're just going to say the word about it if we can't talk about it. So, you know, and getting people to laugh about some of these things. It's sort of like if we can find our way through it together, so much more can happen because we are trying to build a different community. And that means uprooting all kinds of things in order to build a new base.
Right. Great. Well, thanks again for your time. One last question to close out our conversation. So if you had a wish for Milwaukee right now, what would it be?
Well, I think my wish would be that we take this moment to really listen to the elders, to the ancestors that have been asking for us as a community to look at equity and to be transparent about what that means, to be accountable, to make commitments. Because I think we need staying power right now, and the focus and attention that we need to address the racial inequities is not a quick process. We got here by centuries of making things possible for certain groups of people to advance and others to be left behind. We've marginalized too many people, too many groups of people. And we have to build a thriving community. And that thriving community has to be inclusive, and it's got to be defined by equity, you know, and that equity has to be racial equity, gender equity, you know, disability equity, you know, we have to look at so many aspects in order to get our community to thrive. So that would be my hope, is that we keep ourselves honest and willing to keep looking at the hard things that we need to do, because we're not going to change if we just keep thinking, this is working for me, so why would I need to give it up? We have to build a new society, a new world order, and it's going to take all of us finding our way.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, for sharing your time with us, for the work that you and the YWCA are doing to create such positive change in Milwaukee. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And thanks to you, Jenny, and to all the folks at Milwaukee Rep for inviting me to join you. Appreciate it. And I'm glad to be a supporter of Milwaukee Rep.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.